The tray slid across the counter like a bomb landing at her feet. Steam curled into the air, carrying the scent of sizzling eggs, crisp ham, green peppers, and melting cheese. Cather Bergman froze, eyes wide, as if the world had suddenly broken its rules. The mess sergeant, a young American with a kind smile, leaned forward. "That's a Denver omelet, sweetheart," he said. Sweetheart. The word ricocheted in her head. She was a German POW, 2 years of starvation etched into her bones, surviving on watery soups, moldy rations, and the occasional stolen crust of bread. And here was a plate piled high with real food, and he called her sweetheart. Her fingers trembled as they gripped the fork. The metal felt alien, impossibly light compared to the weapons she once trained with in Hamburg. She cut a bite. Steam rose like a ghost. Cheese stretched, pulling apart in molten threads. Her mouth opened, then froze. The fork fell. Her chest heaved. First a sharp intake of air, then a shuddering gasp, then full, uncontrollable sobs that bounced off the tin walls of the mess hall, carrying with them every hunger, fear, and heartbreak of too long years. 20 German nurses watched Cather Bergman as her shoulders shook, her hands trembling over the fork. Sergeant Kowalski froze mid-motion, spatula hovering above the griddle. His face was a mixture of confusion and cautious concern. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, voice almost drowned by the chaotic symphony of a mess hall full of prisoners quietly noticing the strange scene. Cather's mind was a storm. 2 years of ration scraps, potato peels, thin broth, powdered coffee that tasted of sawdust had left her body starving for more than just calories. And now, before her, sat a plate heavy with ham, eggs, peppers, cheese. Real food. She could smell the butter melting on the griddle. It clung to the edges of the omelet like a promise she hadn't dared to imagine. Her fingers dug into her palms, trying to steady herself, but nothing helped. The metal fork felt alien, too light, a thing from a world that didn't exist where she had been. Across the table, Nurse Dorothea Clean reached into the pocket of her uniform with cautious precision. Her eyes flicked toward the American guards near the doorway, then back at the tray in front of her, fingers brushing the Leica she had smuggled past 3 inspections. She clicked a photo. The shutter's faint snap shattered the silent awe around them. "They'll never believe this back in Hamburg," she whispered in German, voice trembling with disbelief. Walrod Summer, who had performed amputations in Tunisia without anesthesia, leaned forward, eyeing Cather's plate like it contained some miraculous artifact. Chunks of ham, pieces of pepper, glistening cheese just for one prisoner, not portioned into the miserable rationing of war. "It's for her alone," Walrod said finally. Dorothea nodded, almost in shock. "I saw him make it." Nearby, a young American soldier barely out of his teens, already finished with his own Denver omelet, flipped a comic book in one hand, fork in the other. The casual normalcy of it struck Cather harder than any soldier's gun could have, enemy or no. He ate the same breakfast she had just been given, without ceremony, without a moment of moralizing. It was ordinary. The contrast made the omelet even more unreal. Cather's first attempt at a bite ended in failure. She lifted a forkful, cheese stretching like golden threads, and her throat closed. The clatter of the metal hitting the tray was loud in the hushed mess hall. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to stop the waves of tears. Memory after memory surged. Birthdays celebrated with a single extra margarine ration, endless days of bitter turnip soup, the death of a fellow nurse from untreated vitamin deficiency. And now, this. She was being offered kindness she couldn't reconcile with everything she had been taught. Gradually, the tremors in her hands subsided enough for her to try again. Smaller bites, slower chewing, salt, fat, soft egg, crisp ham edges, tender crunch of peppers. It was all there, in every sense. Her body remembered food, but her mind wandered back to Bremen, to her mother's kitchen. A life before the war hollowed out everything she had once known. Around her, the other nurses began eating 2 scrambled eggs, buttered toast, oatmeal studded with raisins. Something as simple as dried fruit, given without rationing, struck them all as magical. Dorothea tucked the camera away, then picked up her own spoon. She stirred her oatmeal, watching the raisins swirl like planets in a miniature galaxy. "They're fattening us," Greta Hoffman murmured, more a thought than an accusation. "Like livestock. There's a reason." But the words carried no conviction. She already was eating, unable to resist the abundance. Cather's stomach protested. Half the omelet vanished before cramps forced her to push the plate toward Dorothea. I can't," she admitted, panic rising as she feared punishment. The guards were engrossed in casual conversation about baseball. They didn't care. No threats, no lectures, just freedom to eat, even waste, if her body couldn't handle it. Dorothea slowly finished Katha's portion, savoring it, cataloging every bite through the lens of her hidden camera. Proof, evidence, a record of a kindness she could never have imagined. The mess hall filled further. More prisoners shuffled in, trays laden with eggs, toast, oatmeal, and coffee. An African-American nurse poured steaming cups for anyone who approached. Katha observed another prisoner receive a Denver omelet and freeze, fork hovering, unsure how to proceed. Moments like this were contagious, spreading shock silently from table to table. The ritual of abundance was foreign, almost threatening to a system of deprivation that had defined their last years. Katha rose from the table, legs unsteady, carrying her tray to the collection window where a young American private nodded in recognition. "Ma'am," he said, voice gentle, carefully avoiding labels that might strip away her dignity. Outside, the October sun of Louisiana washed over her, thick and humid. Nothing like Hamburg or Tunisia. Music floated across the compound, trumpets and women's voices drifting on the breeze. It all seemed unreal, yet achingly present. The first wave of shock, awe, and a sense of unearned abundance had passed, but the memory of the Denver omelet would linger. It was more than food, it was a fracture in the narrative they had been fed about the enemy, a reminder that human kindness could arrive unexpectedly, in the simplest of forms. Katha carried that moment like a secret treasure, unsure what it meant, but knowing it was impossible to forget. The crates arrived early Tuesday, stacked awkwardly in the doorway, cardboard edges dented, Red Cross insignia pressed into the thick paper. Patricia Webb, her armband gleaming in the morning light, tugged the boxes inside with effort, hefting them onto the plank floor with a thud that echoed across the barracks. 40 pairs, maybe 50, of nylon stockings peeked out from the flaps, neatly folded, catching sunlight like delicate strands of spider silk. The German nurses froze. Their hands paused mid-stitch, mid-movement, mid-breath. Walrod Summer dropped her needle. 3 holes in the wool tights she had been repairing ran like scars up the leg. Years of mending and rationing had taught her precision under deprivation. But this was surplus. Dorothea's eyes widened, already reaching for her hidden Leica. Each woman in the room moved as if underwater, tentative, unsure of what to do with something that existed solely to be given. "Impossible," someone whispered in German. The word barely left the lips before another voice joined in, equally stunned, equally quiet. Walrod stretched a stocking between her hands, marveling at its sheer lightness. She held it up to the sunlight, tracing the seam along the back. Perfectly straight, flawless. In Hamburg, 1942, stockings were treated like jewels, rationed luxuries that women wore once or twice under careful watch. Now they lay before her, as if they had been produced for free by the hands of strangers who did not demand anything in return. Her throat tightened. Greta Hoffman, usually skeptical, picked one up, fingers clumsy with disbelief. "My sister worked in a factory," she murmured, voice cracking. She pressed the soft fabric to her cheek, almost afraid of breaking the spell. Around them, the other nurses examined their pairs, held them at arm's length, compared colors, transparency, texture. Some cried silently, tears tracing pots down worn faces. Katha studied hers carefully, as if the stockings might vanish if she dared to touch them too roughly. The word free settled in her chest, strange and unearned. She could feel its weight, heavier than any ration card, more impossible than any order from a German officer. Lieutenant Colonel Hale entered, uniform crisp despite the humidity, boots silent against the wooden floor. His eyes swept over the gathered nurses, still frozen with stockings in hand. "Red Cross delivery?" he asked. Patricia Webb confirmed. "Stockings for the women," he added, glancing again at the silent group. "Good, they need them?" The simplicity of his statement carried an authority that made the nurses hesitate, but also relief they would not be punished. Not for simply holding this unexpected gift. Walrod's voice broke the spell, thick with awe. "In America, do normal women have these? Not wives, not special, just normal women." Hale paused, understanding dawning. "My sister Helen works at Woolworth's in Memphis. Lunch breaks, drawer full of them. Just shop girls. Not special, just Helen." The barracks held its breath. Walrod repeated the name, the astonishment echoing. "A drawer full?" "Yes, ma'am." Her mind could not compute this. For years, they had been told Americans were decadent, wasteful, selfish, but here was proof of ordinary abundance, given freely. The nurses spread out the stockings, folding them carefully, trying them on. Katha pulled a pair up her leg slowly, wary of snagging, the fabric whispering against skin unaccustomed to such luxury. She stood, examining herself in the cracked window. It fit perfectly, made her calves look refined, human, not just surviving, not just enduring. She remembered the war before it had swallowed them, the small, ordinary pleasures of life she had forgotten even existed. Dorothea, camera ready, whispered for her to stand by the window. Click. The light caught the nylon, the frame of her legs, the surreal miracle of generosity from the enemy. Later, Lena Vogel watched the optometry truck roll through Camp Ruston's gates, painted white, Red Cross bright against its sides. Her right eye throbbed. She had been operating blind for over a year. Equipment gleamed inside like a mechanical spider had built it. Dr. Chen, a calm figure in uniform, gestured to a chair, his hand steady, professional. Lena froze, trained to expect hierarchy, prejudice, and derision. Here, there was none. Just expertise. Just help. Weeks of degraded vision, of straining to save lives with only half her sight, were wiped away in 40 minutes. Lenses adjusted. The phoropter clicked, the world sharpening into detail Lena had not known existed. Letters, buttons on uniforms, individual leaves on the oak trees outside, each detail slammed into her consciousness. With a brilliance that made her knees buckle, she sobbed on the ground, unashamed, guttural, raw. Her world had been invisible, and now it was not. Walrod and Katha hovered, helping her steady, watching the impossible unfold. Lena's voice, fragile but resolute, spoke through her tears. He gave me eyes back. It seemed too simple to be true, yet there it was, the absolute fact, evidence of generosity in a world built on deprivation and cruelty. Katha helped Lena up, hands shaking, hearts full, all three understanding the gravity of this ordinary yet extraordinary act. The mess hall was a theater of astonishment that morning. Coca-Cola, cases stacked against walls, condensation dripping like tears of disbelief. Katha lifted the bottle to her lips. The carbonation exploded against her tongue, sweet, biting, intoxicating. Memories of turnip soup, rationed water. Powdered coffee faded with each sip. Roz Jackson, beside her, laughed softly, handing her saltines to temper the inevitable chaos within. The act of drinking freely, of savoring sugar, was revolutionary. Katha hiccuped, laughed, almost fell over. It was joy, confusion, and shock mixed into one. Evenings at the mess hall became a sanctuary. American nurses and Red Cross volunteers brought music, decorations, movies. Bing Crosby crooned of white Christmases. Betty Grable twirled in technicolor frivolity. American laughter spilling into the barracks like light. Katha watched, heart tight, as her fellow prisoners and captors alike celebrated trivialities that had once seemed impossible. Music, film, warmth, sugar, nylon stockings, eggs. They were miracles born of abundance, not strategy, not control. Dorothea photographed, cataloging, preserving proof. Roz spoke casually of her sister, Coca-Cola habits, ordinary life in America. Katha drank, listened, learned, her German education of enemies and monsters crumbling around her. The human gestures, small and overwhelming, reshaped their understanding of a world they had been taught was unkind, cruel, absolute. Katha realized the war had not only stripped them of material comfort, but also of imagination. They had forgotten ordinary kindness could exist outside of hierarchy, order, ration cards, or political gain. Stockings, eyeglasses, Coca-Cola. Denver omelet siege was a testament to generosity, a radical act in a world of deprivation. Each left a mark deeper than any battlefield scar. By nightfall, the mess hall emptied, leaving lingering scents of ham, sugar, and butter. Laughter and crying blended, echoes of a day none would ever forget. Katha lay in her bunk, nylon stockings folded with care, thinking of her mother's kitchen, of Lena's restored vision, of Dorothea's camera capturing impossible truths. In the stillness, she understood a quiet revolution had occurred, small, personal, human. Morning light poured through the barracks windows, dust motes drifting lazily in the beams. Katha moved quietly, stacking empty soda bottles and tidying the remnants of yesterday's chaos. Her stomach still ached from too much sugar, too much richness. Coca-Cola, crackers, eggs, butter, but there was a calm in her chest, a strange fullness that went beyond food. Around her, the other nurses were stirring, quietly exchanging glances over stockings, letters, and newspapers. The air felt suspended, waiting for the next miracle. A Red Cross delivery had arrived again, smaller this time, 3 copies of Life magazine, crisp and glossy. Roz handed one to Katha. The cover showed soldiers celebrating victory, kissing girls in Times Square, banners waving, confetti in the air. Katha traced the image with a trembling finger, memorizing faces, folds in clothing, the absurdity of joy captured in print. For years, such images had been propaganda in Germany, distorted, unreachable. Here, they were proof of life beyond deprivation, proof that abundance could exist without manipulation, without fear. Walrod sat beside her, folding the nylons with meticulous care, her eyes distant. Katha noticed the tremor in her hands and understood these items were not just fabric. They were evidence. Evidence that someone, somewhere, had chosen generosity over calculation. Evidence that the stories they had been told about the enemy, the moral bankruptcy, the decadence, were incomplete. Walrod's hand stilled as she held the stockings to the sunlight streaming through the window. She whispered a single word, impossible. The barracks remained silent except for the occasional scrape of paper, the distant hum of machinery from the compound, and the soft laughter of someone recalling a joke from last night. Katha thought of Lena Vogel, her new glasses perched perfectly on her face, eyes sharp, vibrant. She had been blind in one eye for 18 months. Now, the world was in focus again. Every leaf, every thread in the American flag, every nuance of human expression, every detail had been restored. The clarity brought tears, uncontainable, a flood of gratitude and disbelief. Katha's mind wandered to the Denver omelet, the breakfast that had first undone her in the mess hall. Steam rising, cheese stretching, ham crisped at the edges. The richness, the texture, the sheer normalcy of it had shattered 2 years of deprivation in a single bite. She had watched other nurses, Dorothea's camera capturing it, the subtle, almost imperceptible joy spreading like warmth from one frozen heart to another. That moment had become a turning point, a tangible act of kindness that defied explanation, logic, and expectation. The day progressed, a strange rhythm of routine interrupted by subtle wonders. Red Cross deliveries, American nurses sharing medical journals, Coca-Cola, music from a record player, movies with colorful stars, stockings, magazines. Katha felt each act acutely, cataloging the impossibility of it all. She scribbled notes in her journal, lines fragmented, almost stream of consciousness. They give without asking. They feed us. They restore vision. They send letters, magazines. They are not monsters. Monsters do not give eyes. Nylon, soda, eggs. Evenings brought quiet reflection. Katha sat on her bunk, stockings folded in her lap, pen in hand. The other nurses were scattered, some writing letters, others tracing their fingers over the fabric, marveling at its delicacy. Each pair of nylons, each restored vision, each act of casual abundance felt revolutionary. They were reminders that humanity could exist even amidst systems of war, even between enemies. Dorothea's camera captured it all. Shutter clicks, a quiet rebellion, evidence that could survive long after the barracks emptied. The night before departure arrived. Katha and Walrod, Lena and Dorothea, Roz, and a few others gathered quietly. The record player hummed softly, a Bing Crosby tune drifting through the air, mingling with the distant calls of crickets and the rustle of palm fronds outside. The smell of baking ham, left over from the mess hall, still lingered faintly. They spoke in whispers, half English, half German, sharing memories, tips, small jokes, confessions of disbelief. The weight of clarity, of gratitude, of impossible kindness pressed down on them, heavy yet comforting. Letters were written, folded with care. Katha tucked the Life magazines into her bag, carefully annotated for Lena to practice reading once home. Walrod packed the stockings, each wrapped like a relic, evidence of generosity in a world that had taught them cruelty. Patricia Webb's notes, signatures, and inventory lists were preserved alongside, proof that the gifts had been given freely, without expectation, without manipulation. These items were artifacts of a humanity that refused to bend to war's brutality. Morning came. The barracks were quiet, expectant. The repatriation list hung on the board, a simple sheet of paper marking freedom. Katha helped Lena gather her things, steadying her as she packed extra eyeglasses and cleaning solution, instructions memorized. Dorothea discreetly tucked her Leica into a hidden compartment. The photograph of the Denver omelet, steam still rising, Katha's tear-streaked face blurred in the background, safely preserved. The image was proof, a story the world might never believe, yet indisputable evidence of what kindness could look like in wartime. They walked toward the buses that would take them away from Camp Ruston, from Louisiana, from the bubble of impossible abundance and clarity. The air was thick with humidity, the scent of the pine and palm trees clashing with the faint smell of diesel and dust. Katha's stomach, full of Coke, eggs, crackers, and butter, churned in anticipation, in disbelief, in joy. She held the magazines, stockings, and letters close to her chest, tangible symbols of a world that had been unimaginable until now. As they boarded, Katha looked back. The barracks, the mess hall, the crates, the trucks, the record player, the scattered American nurses and MPs, everything had been transformed by small acts, by generosity unbidden, by moments of humanity that refused to acknowledge lines drawn on maps or uniforms. Katha whispered softly to herself, they were not monsters. The bus rumbled to life, carrying them toward freedom, toward home, toward futures that were uncertain but no longer constrained by hunger, blindness, or deprivation. Katha felt the weight of what they had experienced settle in her chest. The gifts, the care, the food, the stockings, the glasses, the music, the movies, they were proof of a different kind of power, the power of ordinary people, to assert humanity amidst unimaginable cruelty. As the vehicle pulled away, she glanced at Dorothea, Roz, Walrod, Lena, faces marked by war, softened now by impossible kindness. They shared a quiet understanding, a pact without words. Evidence had been preserved not just in photographs, letters, and objects, but in memory, in the reshaped hearts and minds of those who had witnessed it. Katha, gripping the packages close, knew they would carry these moments forever. Outside, the Louisiana sun blazed, scattering light across the dust and pavement. Katha could see everything, the individual threads of the flag above the administration building, the sunlight glinting off the crates, the pattern of leaves in the trees, the fine details of faces, expressions, eyes. She breathed deeply, the air thick with humidity and freedom, and allowed herself to feel the full measure of a war's end, of kindness unearned, of miracles in the ordinary. And for the first time in years, Katha felt something she had not dared to hope for, that the world, even broken, could be generous, strange, and beautiful, and that enemies could, at times, be the most human of all. The ships waited quietly at the New Orleans dock, their hulls dark and steady against the morning light. Katha shuffled forward, small bag in hand, the weight of a half-year pressed into its fabric. Inside, the Life magazines, a bar of pale ivory soap, a notebook where English letters had become sentences, sentences had become thoughts. Ross's address nestled between pages, a lifeline for something beyond the war ahead. Walrod clutched her carefully folded nylons, fingers tracing the delicate seams as though holding onto memory itself. Behind, Lena adjusted her American-made glasses, blinking in the sunlight, seeing a world she hadn't touched for 18 months. The woman in front of Katha turned. Recognition flashed in her eyes. The young American nurse, the one who had cried silently in the barracks weeks before. I hope your family is safe, the girl said, voice hesitant, unsure. Katha's chest tightened. She had learned the words Ross had drilled into her. She offered a small, careful smile. Thank you. I hope this for you, too. The line shifted, each step bringing them closer to the gangplank, closer to a new chapter. The ship's horn sounded low, resonant, a mournful song for the old world they were leaving behind. Katha looked down at the dock, at the soil that had fed them, baffled and generous, the place where strangers served eggs and cheese, handed out glasses, magazines. Stockings called her ma'am without question while she was still a prisoner. Her thoughts wandered to Ilse's letter, to the stories of monsters and obedience, to the impossible kindness that had rewritten what she thought she knew. Wrapped in cloth, in a hidden pocket, Dorothea's photograph rested safely among her belongings. The Denver omelet, steam still imagined in her memory, had begun it all, proof that generosity could exist where hate had been taught, proof that the world was not only cruel, that humanity could sneak in through the smallest gestures. The ship moved slowly, the dock shrinking, the Americans fading into the distance. Somewhere, faintly, swing music wove through the morning air. Ahead lay Germany, ruined cities, ration lines, whispers of family and loss. But in her pocket, Ross's address pressed firmly, a small promise of connection, a reminder that bonds could survive oceans and ideologies. Katha pressed a hand to the notebook, to the letters she had written, to the proofs she carried. Some enemies, she had learned, acted with grace. Some truths, too big to deny, could survive even war. She leaned against the railing, the wind pulling at her hair, eyes fixed on the horizon, and felt something settle deep inside. The story was far from over, and for those reading, witnessing this moment across time and space, remember, humanity is found in small acts, in meals shared, in eyes restored, in letters and stockings and kindness offered without expectation. Don't let the world convince you otherwise. Seek it, witness it, carry it forward.